The night vision flickered as Lieutenant Commander Darius Ward scanned the abandoned research facility. 3 years commanding naval intelligence field operations hadn't prepared him for the eerie silence of this place, a black site supposedly abandoned decades ago, yet showing signs of recent activity. Command, this is Phantom Lead. Perimeter secure, proceeding to Central Hub, he whispered into his comm. Static answered him. Comms had been spotty since their approach, but this complete blackout was concerning. Darius signaled his team to maintain position while he advanced. At 38, his weathered features and calculating green eyes reflected years of missions too classified to ever see daylight. The central laboratory doors stood partially open. Inside, a strange blue light pulsed rhythmically, casting long shadows across abandoned equipment. Darius approached cautiously, weapon raised, senses heightened from years of combat experience. The light intensified suddenly, expanding outward in concentric rings. Darius felt his muscles lock in place as the energy field engulfed him. His mind remained alert even as his body refused to respond, a living statue caught in some impossible technology. The world around him stretched, compressed, and then dissolved into absolute darkness. When consciousness returned, Darius found himself in a translucent chamber, his military fatigues replaced by some form of metallic mesh that clung to his muscular frame. Beyond the transparent walls, tall, elegant beings moved with precise grace. Their skin had an opalescent quality that shifted colors with movement, and their eyes, large, almond-shaped, and entirely silver, contained no pupils or irises. One of them approached, studying him with clinical detachment. Female, Darius assessed, though alien in every aspect. Her movements were fluid, almost hypnotic, as she circled his containment unit. This specimen shows remarkable neural activity, she said, her voice melodic yet somehow mechanical. The translator implant is functioning optimally. Darius realized with shock that he understood her perfectly, despite the impossibility of her speaking English. "Where am I?" he demanded, surprised to find he could speak. "Who are you people?" The alien female tilted her head, the gesture unervingly bird-like. "I am Alara Nixvala, first daughter of House Celestial. You are aboard the Imperial Collector, bound for Astralis." Her silver eyes examined him with growing interest. "You are the first of your kind we have encountered who might survive the arenas." "Arenas?" Darius pressed against the transparent barrier. "I'm a military officer of the United States. My disappearance will be investigated." A sound like wind chimes filled the chamber, laughter, he realized. "Your world believes you perished in an unfortunate accident," Alara said. "Time flows differently between our realms. What has been moments for you has been days on your Earth." She approached closer, her 7-foot frame imposing despite its elegance. "You should feel honored. Most species are harvested only for labor or research. You have been deemed worthy of the sacred combat." Over the following days, or what Darius assumed were days in this place of perpetual twilight, he underwent a series of procedures. Neural implants that burned like fire beneath his skin, injections that made his veins glow briefly with iridescent light, and training simulations that tested his combat abilities against impossible opponents. Through it all, Alara watched. Unlike the others who treated him as livestock, her interest seemed different, curious, almost respectful. When finally he was brought to the holding cells beneath what appeared to be a massive coliseum, Darius found himself among dozens of alien beings. Some resembled insects with exoskeletons gleaming under harsh lights, others were reptilian or amphibious. All shared the same look of grim determination. "The new cycle begins," announced a disembodied voice. "Glory awaits those who please the eternal houses. Combat will commence when the twin moons align." From a private observation chamber high above, Alara watched the newest acquisitions. Her attention repeatedly returned to the human. Unlike the others who cowered or raged, he remained calm, analyzing his surroundings, conserving energy. Your interest in the Earthborn is noted, daughter, came a deep voice behind her. Elara turned to face her father, Lord Valerian, his ceremonial armor marking him as a high judge of the arenas. The species shows promise, she replied carefully. Adaptable, intelligent. I believe it may surprise us. See that your scientific curiosity doesn't compromise your judgment, he warned. Remember your position and responsibilities to our house. Elara bowed respectfully, but as her father departed, her gaze returned to the human below. Something about him called to her, stirring feelings long suppressed beneath years of rigid imperial training. Survive your first match, Earthborn, she whispered. Show me what humanity truly is. The roar of the crowd washed over Darius like a physical wave as he stood in the preparation chamber. His first match had been a brutal introduction to Cellarith combat. He'd survived more by instinct than skill against a hulking opponent with 4 arms and skin like granite. The victory had been ugly, desperate, and had left him with 3 cracked ribs and a collection of new scars. 2 matches later, he remained undefeated but knew his luck would soon run out. The other combatants used fighting styles he'd never encountered, wielding their alien physiologies to devastating effect. His human reflexes and military training could only compensate so much against beings evolved for different gravities and atmospheres. Human, a guard grunted, sliding a tray of nutrient paste into his cell. Your presence is required in the secondary training facility. Darius looked up, suspicious. My next match isn't for 2 cycles. The guard's multifaceted eyes reflected Darius's image back at him. Orders from above. Now move. Led through a series of corridors he hadn't seen before, Darius mentally mapped each turn, cataloging security measures. Old habits died hard. The secondary facility was smaller than the main arena, empty of other fighters, with various training apparatus arranged around a central sparring circle. Wait here, the guard instructed before departing. Darius surveyed the room, calculating potential weapons, escape routes. Your situational awareness is impressive, came a melodious voice behind him. He turned sharply to find Elara stepping from a concealed entrance. Up close, her alien beauty was even more striking, her opalescent skin shifting between pale blue and violet, her silver eyes reflecting light like polished mirrors. She wore a form-fitting training suit rather than the elaborate robes he'd seen her in previously. First daughter, Darius acknowledged cautiously. To what do I owe this unexpected meeting? You continue to survive, Earthborn, she said, circling him with that same bird-like grace. Yet your technique is primitive. Effective, but unsustainable against higher-tier opponents. I adapt. Not quickly enough. She stopped directly before him. Though he stood 6 feet tall, she towered over him by nearly a foot. Your next opponent has venomous spines and reflexes 3 times faster than your own. You will die unless you learn. And you're offering to teach me? Darius raised an eyebrow. Why would a noble of the Eternal Houses train a combat slave? Something flashed across her alien features, annoyance, perhaps. The reasons are my own. Will you accept instruction or not? Darius considered her carefully. I accept. What followed was the most grueling training session he'd ever experienced. Elara was relentless, demonstrating Cellarith fighting techniques that emphasized neural speed and energy conservation, vastly different from Earth's combat styles that relied heavily on physical strength. The center point lies just below your navel, she explained, placing her slender fingers against his abdomen. Darius felt a strange electricity at her touch. All movement flows from this point. Your species wastes energy with unnecessary motions. For hours they trained, and despite the vast differences in their physiologies, Darius began to grasp the fundamental principles. When they finally paused, he was drenched in sweat, muscles trembling with exertion. Your ability to assimilate knowledge is unexpected, Elara admitted, offering him a container of shimmering liquid. "This will help your muscles recover." Darius accepted warily. "You still haven't told me why you're helping me." Elara was silent for a long moment, her silver eyes unreadable. "Your world. Earth. Tell me about it." The request surprised him. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Your cultures, your history. How humans live." And so began their unusual exchange. For the remainder of that cycle and in secret meetings that followed, Darius taught Elara about Earth while she trained him in Cellarith combat. He spoke of oceans and mountains, of humanity's triumphs and failures, of music and art and the endless diversity of human experience. In return, she showed him how to anticipate the movements of various species he might face, how to exploit weaknesses in their natural defenses, and most importantly, how to conserve energy for prolonged fights. "The Gravalians have poor peripheral vision," she explained during one session, demonstrating a sideways approach. "And the Mechari, despite their armored plates, have vulnerable junction points here and here." As weeks passed, their interactions became less formal. Darius noticed subtle changes in Elara, genuine curiosity when he spoke of Earth, brief touches that lingered longer than necessary during training, questions that went beyond tactical advantage. "Do humans form pair bonds?" she asked once, attempting to sound clinical though something in her tone betrayed deeper interest. "We call it falling in love," Darius replied, studying her reaction. "When two people form a connection that goes beyond mere attraction or convenience. Such attachments are considered weaknesses in Cellarith society," she said quietly. "Especially among the noble houses. Our unions are strategic, designed to strengthen bloodlines and political alliances." "That sounds lonely." Her silver eyes met his. "It is our way." After one particularly intense training session, as Darius demonstrated a human martial arts technique, Elara moved too close. They collided, his hands instinctively catching her waist to steady her. For a breathless moment, they remained frozen, physical contact extending beyond necessity. "Your heart rate has increased," she observed, not pulling away. Her hand rose hesitantly to his chest, feeling the rhythm. "Is this a stress response?" "Not exactly," Darius admitted, acutely aware of her proximity, of the strange, subtle fragrance that emanated from her skin, something like ozone after lightning. "Mine also beats faster," she confessed, voice barely above a whisper. "When we train. When you speak of your world." Her fingers brushed his jaw, exploring the texture of his stubble with scientific curiosity that seemed to mask something more personal. "This is problematic." Before Darius could respond, an alert sounded from a device at her wrist. Elara stepped back immediately, composure restored. "Your next match is tomorrow," she said, professional once more. "Remember what I've taught you. The Zelani fighter will target your lower extremities first. Be prepared." As she turned to leave through her private entrance, Darius called after her. "Same time next cycle?" Elara paused, not turning back. "Yes," she said softly. "I will come." As the door sealed behind her, Darius stood alone in the training facility, realizing that somewhere between learning to survive and teaching her about humanity, something impossible had begun to form between them, a connection that could get them both killed in this alien world where he was nothing but entertainment and she was nobility bound by ancient tradition. The arena thundered with the sounds of 60,000 Cellarith spectators stamping their feet in unison, a deafening rhythm that had once disoriented Darius but now served as the backdrop to his concentration. 6 months into his captivity, he had become something unprecedented in the history of the Eternal Houses games, a human champion. "The Earthborn," the announcer's voice boomed across the massive Colosseum. "Undefeated in 15 consecutive matches." Darius rolled his shoulders, feeling the familiar weight of the ceremonial armor gifted to him after his 10th victory. Unlike the bulky protection worn by most fighters, his was lightweight, accentuating rather than hindering the fluid movements Alara had taught him. His opponent today was a Thessalian war priest, a massive being with translucent skin that revealed pulsing internal organs and musculature that seemed to shift and reconfigure with each movement. In its six-fingered hands, it carried serrated blades that hummed with energy. "Begin," commanded the master of games, and the crowd fell suddenly silent. The Thessalian charged, blades whirling in a deadly pattern designed to overwhelm through sheer aggression. 6 months ago, Darius would have retreated, sought defensive position. Now, he stepped into the attack. Using the center-point technique Alara had drilled into him, he redirected his momentum, sliding beneath the arc of the blades and striking precisely at the junction where the creature's primary heart connected to its secondary circulatory system, knowledge Alara had whispered to him during their last training session. The Thessalian staggered, organs visibly spasming beneath its transparent skin. Darius pressed his advantage, executing a complex series of strikes that targeted nerve clusters and vulnerability points unique to Thessalian physiology. Within minutes, his opponent lay unconscious but alive, another break from tradition, as Darius refused to deliver fatal blows when victory was assured. The crowd erupted in a frenzy of approval, their earlier silence shattered by screams and calls of his arena name. From his peripheral vision, Darius spotted Alara in the royal box, her expression carefully neutral though her eyes betrayed something more. Later that evening, as attendants cleaned and treated his minor wounds in his new private quarters, a privilege earned through his victories, Darius sensed rather than heard the secret panel sliding open. "Leave us," came Alara's voice, dismissing the medical attendants who immediately bowed and departed without question. "That was reckless," she said once they were alone, her tone stern though her eyes held concern. The Thessalian secondary blades were coated with neurotoxins. "I knew where to strike," Darius replied, watching as she moved across the room with her characteristic grace. "I had an excellent teacher." Something like a smile ghosted across her alien features. "Your fame grows dangerous, Darius. My father questions your unusual success rate. Others in the court whisper of outside assistance. Are you in danger?" His concern for her safety had grown alongside their deepening connection. "Not yet. My position protects me, but—" She hesitated, moving closer to where he sat on the edge of his sleeping platform. "We must be more cautious. Or we could stop," Darius offered, though the words tasted bitter. Alara's silver eyes darkened momentarily. "Is that what you want?" "No." His answer came without hesitation. The silence between them hummed with unspoken words, with the growing tension that had built through months of secret meetings, ostensibly for training, yet increasingly filled with conversations about their worlds, with lingering glances and accidental touches that felt less accidental each time. "I brought you something," she said finally, withdrawing a small device from her robes. "It contains historical texts about Earth that I found in our archives. Your planet was visited briefly during your medieval period. I thought, you might enjoy reading about your world." Darius accepted the gift, their fingers brushing. "Thank you. It's been difficult, being cut off from everything I knew." "I understand isolation," she said quietly. "Even surrounded by my own kind." Without thinking, Darius reached up, his hand hovering near her face. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. Gently, he traced the delicate ridges along her temple, evolutionary adaptations that enhanced Celarith's sensory perception. Her skin felt warmer than human temperature, with a subtle current beneath, almost like a mild electric field. "Your touch is different," she whispered, eyes half closing. Celarith rarely make physical contact outside of formal contexts or reproduction. Humans touch to communicate, Darius explained, his voice low. To express connection, comfort, desire. Her eyes opened fully at this last word, studying him with new intensity. "Show me." Heart racing, Darius stood, eliminating the height difference between them. Slowly, giving her time to retreat, he cradled her face between his palms. When she didn't pull away, he leaned forward, pressing his lips to hers in a gentle, exploratory kiss. For a moment she froze, clearly unfamiliar with the gesture. Then, hesitantly, she began to respond, her hands rising to rest uncertainly on his shoulders. When they parted, Elara looked at him with wonder. This is how humans express attraction. One of many ways, Darius answered, his voice rougher than intended. Show me more, she whispered, and this time she initiated the contact, her body pressing against his with newfound boldness. What followed was a beautiful clash of worlds, her alien grace meeting his human passion, both discovering the strange and wonderful differences in their physiologies. Her skin glowed faintly in the dimmed lights, responsive to his touch in ways that fascinated and aroused him. Where human intimacy involved familiar patterns, this was exploration in its purest form, each caress, each response a new discovery. Elara's natural restraint gradually gave way to a surprising intensity. Your species experiences pleasure differently, she gasped as his mouth traced the sensitive ridges along her neck. We are taught to control such responses. Stop controlling, Darius murmured against her skin. Just feel. Hours later, they lay entwined on his sleeping platform, her opalescent skin still faintly luminous from their shared passion. Darius traced patterns along the curve of her spine, marveling at how someone, so alien could now feel so essential to his existence. This changes everything, Elara whispered, her head resting on his chest, listening to his heartbeat with scientific curiosity mixed with newfound intimacy. Yes, Darius agreed, knowing they had crossed a line from which neither could retreat. Whatever had been growing between them through months of training and conversation had crystallized into something unmistakable, undeniable, and absolutely forbidden in Cellaret society. If they discover us, she began. They won't, he promised, though both knew the danger grew with each secret meeting. As dawn approached, bringing with it the necessity of separation before her absence was noted, Elara dressed reluctantly. At the hidden panel, she paused, turning back to him with uncharacteristic vulnerability in her silver eyes. Among your people, what would this make us? She asked softly. Darius considered the impossibility of their situation, a human captive and an alien noblewoman, separated by species, status, and entire worlds. Yet the answer came easily. Lovers, he said simply. Against all odds. The celestial palace hummed with activity as preparations for the seasonal tournament reached fever pitch. Elara moved through the crowded corridors with practiced composure, though beneath her serene exterior, her mind raced. The past 3 months had transformed her understanding of existence. What had begun as scientific curiosity about an alien species had evolved into something she lacked proper terminology for in her own language, something humans called love. First daughter, called a silken voice behind her. Elara turned to face Thalder Vexmaris, her father's most trusted advisor and a senior member of the Imperial Intelligence Guild. His unnaturally pale skin marked him as one of the rare Celarith who had undergone extensive genetic modification. The High Council requests your presence, he said, his silver eyes narrowing slightly. There are concerns about the upcoming tournament. Of course, Elara replied, maintaining her neutral expression despite the sudden acceleration of her heartbeat. I'll attend immediately. The council chamber was a massive dome carved from a single piece of translucent crystal, casting rainbow hues across the 12 members seated at the curved table. Her father, Lord Valerian, sat at the center, his ceremonial armor gleaming. Daughter, he acknowledged as she entered. We wish to discuss the human combatant. Elara bowed formally. The Earthborn has proven quite valuable to the games, father. Attendance has increased 30% since his rise to prominence. Indeed, Lord Valerian agreed. Which makes recent developments all the more troubling. With a gesture, he activated a holographic display in the center of the table. Elara watched with carefully controlled horror as images appeared, surveillance footage showing her entering Darius's quarters through the hidden passage. The timestamp indicated it was from 3 nights ago. Fortunately, her father continued, this footage has been contained. No one outside this chamber has viewed it. Elara's mind raced through possibilities, calculations, contingencies. I've been conducting specialized training sessions, she said smoothly. The human's unique physiology requires. Spare us, daughter, interrupted Counselor Zex, her father's most vocal rival. Our surveillance systems record heat signatures and biochemical fluctuations. The nature of your instruction is quite clear. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Elara stood perfectly still, the training of a lifetime preventing any outward display of the fear coursing through her. The question, Lord Valerian said quietly, is not what you have done, but why. Have you been compromised? Is this a biological response, some unknown human pheromone perhaps? The clinical nature of the question provided Elara an unexpected opening. Partially, Father. I've been conducting research on human biochemistry. Their emotional responses produce unique neurochemical signatures that affect surrounding beings. I've documented these effects extensively. She reached into her robes, retrieving a data crystal which she placed on the table with steady hands. My findings suggest potential medical applications that could benefit our species. The research required direct interaction too. How convenient, Counselor Zex interrupted again, that your research required such intimate contact. Lord Valerian raised a hand, silencing further comment. Regardless of your motivations, this presents us with a significant problem. The human has become too successful, too popular with the masses. Some have even begun to question the natural superiority of Celerith over lesser species. His eyes fixed on Elara. And now this complication. What do you propose, Father? Elara asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. The tournament provides an elegant solution, he replied. The human will face the Krell champion, with certain adjustments to ensure a properly humbling defeat. After which, the specimen will be transferred to the scientific division for study. He paused, watching her carefully. Unless you object, daughter? The trap was perfectly laid. Any protest would confirm her emotional compromise. Elara bowed her head. I serve the Empire, Father. As always. Good. Lord Valerian stood, signaling the meeting's end. You are dismissed, and confined to your quarters until the tournament. For your own protection, of course. As guards escorted her from the chamber, Elara's mind raced. She had 12 hours before Darius's match against the Krell champion, a biomechanical warrior specifically engineered for arena combat. And now she knew they planned to ensure his defeat, likely through poison or sabotage. Back in her quarters, sealed under guard, Elara paced. The surveillance systems would be watching for any unusual behavior. Her private communications would be monitored. They had effectively cut off all means of warning Darius. All conventional means, at least. 3 hours later, as most of the palace prepared for pre-tournament celebrations, Elara activated the neural implant at the base of her skull, a modification all nobleborn Celerith received at maturity. Usually used for accessing the Imperial database and secure communications, she had spent months secretly reconfiguring hers for a different purpose. Closing her eyes, she concentrated on the unique frequency she had attuned to Darius's translator implant. It had been a risk, modifying his device during one of their early training sessions, but now it offered their only hope. Darius, she projected, focusing her thoughts into the narrow transmission band. In his preparation chamber, Darius jolted as Elara's voice seemed to materialize inside his head. Elara? He thought back, unsure if the stress of the upcoming fight was causing hallucinations. Listen carefully, her voice came again. They know about us. The council has ordered your match rigged. The Krell will be enhanced, and you'll likely be drugged through your pre-fight supplements. Darius glanced at the untouched nutrient drink beside him. What do I do? Survive, came her reply. Fight defensively. I'm working on a plan, but I need time. They're watching you? Yes. But not as closely as they think. There was a pause. Darius, what we've shared. I know, he responded, feeling her concern, her fear, somehow transmitted along with her thoughts. I feel the same. Be ready when the opportunity comes, she said, her mental voice growing fainter. I cannot maintain this connection long without detection. As their connection faded, Darius dumped the nutrient drink into a waste receptacle and prepared himself mentally for what would likely be the fight of his life. The arena was packed beyond capacity when Darius emerged to thunderous applause. The ceremonial announcer introduced him with the usual flourish, highlighting his undefeated record and unique fighting style. Then the massive doors opposite him parted, revealing his opponent. The Krell warrior stood nearly 9 feet tall, its exoskeleton gleaming with metallic implants. Its natural carapace had been augmented with serrated edges, and hydraulic systems visibly enhanced its already formidable limbs. Begin, the Master of Games commanded. The Krell moved with impossible speed for its size, crossing the arena floor in a blur. Darius barely avoided the first attack, rolling beneath a sweeping claw that would have severed his head from his shoulders. The crowd gasped at the unusual ferocity, even for the notoriously violent Krell. Defensive positioning, Elara had taught him. Energy conservation. Darius employed every technique they had practiced, focusing on survival rather than victory. After 15 minutes of increasingly desperate evasions, Darius began to feel the first effects of fatigue. His reactions slowed fractionally, enough for the Krell to land a glancing blow that opened a gash along his ribs. The crowd roared at the sight of human blood. From her position in the royal box, Elara watched in growing desperation. Her father's satisfied expression confirmed her worst fears. The match was proceeding exactly as planned. The Krell was clearly enhanced beyond regulation limits, its movements unnaturally fast and precise. Without warning, the palace lighting flickered, then failed completely, plunging the arena into darkness broken only by emergency illumination. Confusion spread through the crowd as the primary systems struggled to reactivate. Now! Elara's voice filled Darius's mind. Escape corridor beneath the northwest quadrant floor panel. I've overridden the security locks. Taking advantage of the chaos, Darius sprinted toward the indicated section of the arena floor, the Krell momentarily disoriented by the system failure. Finding the floor panel, he wrenched it open to reveal a narrow maintenance tunnel. As alarms began to sound throughout the complex, Darius slipped into the darkness below, his heart pounding with more than exertion. Whatever happened next, everything had changed. Elara had chosen him over her people, her position, her world, and he'd just become the most wanted fugitive on an alien planet. The maintenance tunnels beneath the celestial arena formed a labyrinthine network, designed for the unseen servants who kept the spectacle above functioning. Darius navigated by the dim emergency lighting, following the mental map Elara had implanted during their last neural connection. His side burned where the Krell's claw had cut him, but adrenaline kept him moving forward. After what felt like hours of crawling through increasingly narrow passages, he reached a junction marked with symbols he recognized from Elara's teachings, Imperial Service Access. The panel slid open at his touch, revealing a small chamber containing civilian Cellarith clothing and a medical kit. She planned this, he realized, quickly applying healing gel to his wound before changing into the loose-fitting garments that would help disguise his human features in the chaos above. A soft chime emanated from a communication device hidden among the supplies. Activating it, he saw a holographic map appear, showing his position and a pulsing destination marker several levels up. The escape route led him through service corridors, automated cargo platforms, and finally into an auxiliary hangar where smaller vessels were maintained. Alarms still blared throughout the complex, but the security forces seemed focused on the main arena and outer perimeters, not on internal service areas. Darius slipped between rows of sleek spacecraft, his eyes scanning for, there. A slender figure in a maintenance technician's uniform waited beside a small transport vessel. Even in disguise, he would recognize Ilara's distinctive grace anywhere. "You made it," she said as he approached, relief evident in her voice. "Were you followed?" "No. Your distraction worked perfectly." Darius fought the urge to embrace her, aware that any surveillance systems in the hangar would be looking for unusual behavior. "What did you do, exactly?" "Overloaded the primary power conduits by redirecting energy from the arena's containment fields," she explained, leading him toward the ship. "It won't hold them for long. We need to be off-world before they realize which vessel is missing." Inside the transport, Ilara moved to the control interface, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. "I've programmed a course through the outer asteroid belt. It should mask our energy signature long enough to reach the wormhole stabilizers." "Wormhole stabilizers?" Darius asked, strapping himself into the co-pilot's position. "Artificial constructs that maintain transit corridors between distant systems." The engines hummed to life beneath them. "Including one near your solar system that's been dormant for millennia." As the hangar doors parted for their seemingly routine departure, Darius felt a strange mixture of hope and disbelief. "You're taking me home?" Ilara's hands hesitated momentarily over the controls. "If that's what you want." Before he could respond, the ship's communication system activated, displaying Lord Valerian's stern visage. "Daughter," he said, his voice cold with disappointment. "Your override codes were detected the moment you activated them." Ilara's composure faltered for the first time since Darius had known her. "Father. You shame our house and our people," he interrupted. "For what? This primitive creature? Security vessels are already moving to intercept you." On the tactical display, multiple signals appeared, converging on their position from all directions. "I've dispatched the Krell champion to retrieve you both," Lord Valerian continued. "The human will be dissected to understand what manner of influence he has exerted over you. You will undergo neural recalibration." "We are mapping new territory, Father," Ilara replied, accelerating the ship toward the asteroid belt ahead. "Humans are not what we believed, they're capable of forms of connection our society has forgotten. I've experienced something that transcends our biological and cultural differences." "Corruption," Lord Valerian spat. "The Council was right. You've been compromised." "No," she said firmly. "I've been awakened." With that, she terminated the communication and turned to Darius. "The pursuit ships will catch us before we reach the wormhole." Darius studied the tactical display, military training asserting itself. "These asteroid fields, they'll slow larger vessels more than us." "Yes, but not enough. Then we need a diversion." He pointed to a particular cluster of asteroids. "What would happen if we used the ship's energy weapons on those specific formations?" Ilara analyzed the composition data. "They're rich in volatile compounds. The resulting explosion would disrupt sensors and create a debris field, but..." She met his gaze. "We'd need to fly directly through the explosion's aftermath. The ship might not withstand it. Better than certain capture." Darius moved to the weapons station. "I'll handle this part. You focus on flying." The next 20 minutes were a blur of desperate maneuvers. Darius targeted the asteroid cluster with precision strikes while Ilara piloted with supernatural skill, weaving between floating mountains of rock and ice. When the volatile compounds ignited, the resulting explosion dwarfed their calculations, sending superheated fragments in all directions. "Brace for impact." Elara called as she drove their vessel straight through the heart of the expanding chaos. The ship shuddered violently, warning systems screaming as shields failed and hull integrity dropped to critical levels. Something in the engine compartment exploded, throwing Darius against his restraints hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. Through the mayhem, Elara maintained control, her hands moving across the interface with impossible speed as she compensated for failing systems. When they emerged from the debris field, the tactical display showed the pursuing vessels had fallen back, some disabled by fragments, others forced to navigate the hazardous new conditions more cautiously. "We've bought time," she said, her voice strained, "but the engines are critically damaged. We can't reach the wormhole." Darius moved to her side, placing his hand over hers on the control interface. "What options do we have?" Elara's silver eyes met his, determination replacing fear. "There's an uncharted planetoid within our remaining range. No Cellarith outposts, but potentially habitable. We could attempt an emergency landing. Then that's our play." Darius nodded, trusting her judgment completely. As they limped toward the distant planetoid, the ship's remaining systems gradually failed. Life support cycled to emergency reserves. Navigation became increasingly unreliable. By the time they entered the planetoid's atmosphere, they were essentially flying blind. The crash landing was violent but survivable, a testament to Elara's extraordinary piloting skills. They emerged from the wreckage into an alien landscape of purple vegetation and twin setting suns that painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold. "Are you hurt?" Darius asked, helping Elara from the damaged craft. "Nothing serious." She surveyed their surroundings with a scientist's eye. "Oxygen levels are compatible with both our species. Radiation within tolerable parameters. The flora suggests a developed ecosystem. Can they track us here?" "Eventually," she admitted. "But the asteroid field's disruption will confuse their sensors for some time. We have, perhaps days before they locate us." Darius took her hands in his, finally able to touch her without fear of surveillance. "You sacrificed everything. Your position, your people, your future." "No," Elara countered, her fingers intertwining with his in that still new gesture of intimacy. "I chose a different future. One not dictated by traditions that separate rather than unite." As night fell on the unnamed world, they established a small camp using emergency supplies from the ship. Beneath an unfamiliar canopy of stars, they lay together, two beings from vastly different worlds finding solace in each other's embrace. "The pursuit ships will come," Darius acknowledged as they watched distant lightning illuminate strange cloud formations. "Yes," Elara agreed. "But not tonight." "And when they do?" She turned to face him, her opalescent skin glowing softly in the planetoid's natural bioluminescence. "The wormhole terminus near your solar system remains our best option. If we can repair the ship's communication array, I might be able to send a targeted signal, awaken the dormant stabilizers. It would require precise calculations." "And then what?" Darius asked, tracing the delicate ridges along her temple, a gesture he now knew brought her comfort. "Then we face the unknown, together." Her silver eyes held questions she hadn't voiced. "Your world, would there be a place for me there?" Darius considered the implications of bringing an alien being to Earth, the chaos, the fear, the inevitable government intervention. Yet he also imagined the possibilities, Elara's knowledge helping humanity advance, building bridges between worlds, forging a path neither species had imagined. "It won't be easy," he admitted. "Humans fear what they don't understand. But we also adapt, learn, grow. Some will see you as I do, not as alien, but as a person, brilliant and beautiful." "And what of us?" she asked softly. "This connection we've formed, is it strong enough to survive such challenges?" In answer, Darius kissed her, no longer an alien gesture but a shared language of intimacy they'd created together. When they parted, he said, "What exists between us transcended the differences of our worlds, the barriers of status and species. Whatever comes next, we face it as one." Above them, the night sky suddenly blazed with light, a meteor shower painting fiery trails across the darkness. To Darius, it seemed a fitting metaphor for their journey, burning bright against impossible odds, defying gravity and expectation. "Tomorrow we begin repairs," Elara said, practical even in this moment of peace. "Calculate trajectories, prepare for what comes." "And tonight?" Darius asked, drawing her closer. Her answer came in both words and touch, in the meeting of two beings who had found in each other something neither world had prepared them for, a connection that defied classification in either human or Celarith terms. "Tonight," she whispered against his skin, "we exist only for each other. Two worlds colliding, creating something entirely new." As dawn approached on their temporary sanctuary, Darius watched Elara sleeping beside him. Whatever challenges awaited, pursuit ships, Earth's reaction to an alien visitor, the vast adjustment both would face in either world, he knew with absolute certainty that their impossible journey had only just begun. Some bonds, once formed, could not be broken by mere distance, difference, or danger. What had started as a desperate bid for survival in an alien coliseum had transformed into something neither human language nor Celarith terminology could fully capture, a new reality forged between worlds, between hearts, between souls. And in that moment, watching the alien sunrise paint Elara's features in gold, Darius knew they had already won the only battle that truly mattered.